One of my pet peeves as a landscape photographer is when people say, wow, you're so lucky, or you got so lucky out there when you get some epic light. I've got to say, over 15 years of photography, hardly any of my work has come down to luck. The majority of it is about preparation and seizing the opportunity. Especially when it comes to a sunrise or sunset and getting some epic light, the one thing you need to be doing as a photographer is watching the skies and keeping an eye on the weather forecast. So in this video, I want you to join me out in the field as we capture a pretty special sunset here in Fiordland. I'll talk about some of the compositional theory. We'll also pull up some of the raw files as well, because it's one thing to capture these scenes, but then processing the raw files can be a little bit challenging. Keep an eye on those skies, guys. That is absolutely critical. Let's head out into the field. I had the head cam on for this one. I didn't bother talking too much out in the moment. I just sometimes need to be out there and just enjoy without talking too much. But I'll add some narration now over the footage, and then I'll meet you back here and we'll talk about some of the theory behind creating these frames. So I recently headed out one afternoon in the boat to do some exploring, and it was all about the cloud that was building up in the sky and the potential for a clearing on the horizon. I use satellite imagery to check for clearings, and all you got to do is look towards the west or the southwest, depending on the time of year. I could definitely see a big gap out there. So what I had to do was find a position on the lake where I could actually face towards the best light. Now what's interesting was the cloud started to burn off. As you can see here, it's some nice light, but it's burning off and it's gonna really lose its impact. Initially we had a sky full of cloud. It's starting to thin out, so I got a little bit discouraged, but sure enough, it started to build back up again. And you'll see here, it's getting quite dense. This is the tricky part, because it can always change last minute and it can either get better or it can get worse. But by this stage, look at that. It's just getting more and more and more. I started shooting now, just going towards that golden glow that's there. But I knew the best was yet to come. Once that sun gets a little bit lower, we're going to get more of a pink, orange, red hue come through. So I shot a few frames from the back of the boat here, just getting the layering of trees in that mid-ground area with the mountain behind. But then I wanted to put a wide angle on and really try to emphasize that mountain in the back, but pick up the sky and the reflection. This was the most exciting part, knowing the lake was dead calm, which is quite rare for a huge lake. Getting a reflective lake, and when you have color, that's awesome, because now you're going to get twice as much in your frame. So I figured I could come through here on this tiny little outlet of stone. The best part about this though is there's some vegetation around, so it's nice to be able to include that in the composition if possible. I just feel like it really brings it to life and helps have a bit more depth in the frame. What I'm going to use, I initially try the 16 to 35, but I find out pretty quick that it's just not wide enough, especially if I want to pick up some of the lichen which is hanging off the trees here. So I decide to put on the 10mm prime, the Lauer that I've been shooting. You guys would have seen this in some of the other videos. And once I put that on, it really allows me to build out the whole scene. Of course, the trade-off when you're shooting really wide like that, one downside is the subject matter in the distance will look a little smaller, but this shot, it's not so much about the mountains, it's also about the sunset and the light. And having that extra width is allowing me to fit more of that sky in, as well as the surrounding environment. Look at all the cloud now. That's the cloud I'm excited about. The whole sky is full of cloud, but you can see that gap on the horizon there, that yellow gap. Absolutely perfect. So I started shooting now to get some compositional ideas anyway. We've got some color starting to spread. Absolutely incredible. Some pinks. Look at that cloud. And now the show is about to begin. So with the compositional theory, I like this small tree on the right because it's kind of putting an end cap on the composition so the eye won't drift out of the frame. But the best part is it's curving in towards the centralized part of the image. What was interesting down here was that tiny little opening, that channel in the rock. So I strategically, with my composition, symmetry is so important and balance. So I decided to position myself so the point and reflection of the mountain kind of meets where that channel is. I don't like sitting and shooting the same comp over and over. So even just on this little outlet here, what I did was find a variety of different compositions to work with. And then I just circled around and reshot them multiple times. Even heading back on the boat now, I decided to get the 16 to 35 out and reshoot that comp that we captured right at the start, because now we've got that pink cloud and the color compared to when we shot it earlier on. There's no right or wrong. Maybe the original is better because it was a bit more light, but I just like to do that in the field. Just revisit the comps and just shoot, make sure I'm happy with it, tweak it, move to the next comp, so on and so forth. And that way, when you get back, which is the position I'm in now, I've got all these raw files there and I've removed myself from the moment, from the experience. This has been several weeks since I shot this. So now when I run through these raw files, I've got less emotion. I'm less attached to what I might have been attached to initially, and that's going to allow me to make the best decision when it comes to selecting the shot that I actually publish and share. Let's have a look at some of these raw files. You'll see how dark these are, and that's all fine. It's okay. We're shooting for the highlights back here, and just knowing my camera, and this is for most modern cameras, and when I say modern, the dynamic range on cameras has been this good for over 10 years now. So if you haven't shot this way before, shooting for the highlights, don't be alarmed. It's an effective way to shoot. It's counter-intuitive because you're shooting such dark files, but you'll see once we lift the shadows up, the details are in there and it's really clean, especially if you're keeping those ISOs low, more than usable. Look down there. And we don't need shadows bright anyway. We're not trying to get them right up like that. And even then, you could do that and apply some noise reduction. Look how clean it is. So shooting for the highlights just means we can do a single exposure. We're not messing around with blending later on. And if you're shooting for the highlights, you'll be going, the shadows, the opposite, then you'll be going home with a file like that potentially. And the problem is you've overexposed the sky. And the highlight recovery is generally not as good, especially when you have those rich tones up there. So that's why myself and many other professionals you'll see are shooting like this, shooting for the highlights and then revealing the dark tones in post. So I've just pushed Command A. So I've got these 3 files selected. And now when I just do a very small amount of processing here, I'm doing this now to just basically see the details, and then we can talk about the composition and actually start some processing. So basically I captured this frame, and this one here. Now there was a variety of others. This is why I really enjoy just in the field, not sitting on the one comp. So when you get back here, you can really go, okay, which is the one that tells the story for me? Which do I resonate most with? You can't make that decision in the field, in my opinion. You just got to enjoy the moment, run on instinct, mix it up, get back, let the time and emotion fade, and then you can decide. Now, I like this one because of this tree on the right, and the mosses. Oh, it's not moss, it's actually a lichen, but I love those lichens, and then this tree curving in. I tried to balance that big subject out with this little plant down there. Without that, it would be quite an open space, and a vertical frame probably would have been better. But I left the horizontal there. On this particular one, I was trying to go for a real little natural frame and leading the eye through, which I think it does do. But I don't think it's doing justice to the epic light we have, because we're kind of concealing too much of the cloud and the reflection, the light down there. So for that reason, I probably won't be processing this one. And then this one does the opposite, where it becomes very simplified and it works, but I think it's maybe a little too simple for my liking. So I'm leaning towards keeping this one because we're getting the best of all the worlds. We're getting the plant life, the depth, because we've got near and far subject matter. We're getting enough reflection, enough sky, and then a nice little focal point back there with the mountain. So hopefully that makes sense. And it is subjective. Some people say, no, I like this one, like that one, etc. I've got a horizontal out here as well. I've still got a lot of frames, but I'm definitely gravitating towards this one. Like I said, you're shooting pretty dark, so now it becomes a game of, can we reveal the right details in the right places? To reset everything now, generally, if you've seen me process before, you know I like to use that landscape profile. This is that one scenario where I find it might go a little overboard with the saturation, the richness. So I'll leave the profile on the Adobe Color for this one. And again, it's just bringing up the exposure so everything comes up nice and even, so it looks more natural. Then we can do a little highlight recovery, a little shadow recovery, and even some of the blacks here. And already we've come a long way. We're going from that to that. We're making some progress. Next thing I do is just jump into the color panel and just increase the vibrance and a small amount of saturation. And I'm going to actually cool this down a little. That will work our color contrast here, the cool and warm, which we have happening. I really like that. I want to lean into that. I don't want the whole thing warm. I want color contrast, which is what was already there. So we're just working what's already there. We're not trying to add anything that wasn't. Now I'm going to push K. And if you've seen me process before, you know the adjustment brush is all I use. You can do it in Lightroom, here in Adobe Camera Raw. You can do this in Capture One. It's nice and easy. I've got lots of videos on this in the YouTube. On YouTube. And if you want to learn more in depth and follow along step by step, just check out the link in the description below for a longer masterclass on my post-processing techniques. I trust that you're going to find it easy to learn and very effective. We're not relying on automated methods. Even now, I've just darkened that sky. You're saying, why don't you do a sky selection? Well, you do a sky selection, it's going to make a mess of this area and create little halos. And the way light works, the horizon's always lighter than the cloud up here. Sky selection will hit down here too, and now you're going to darken down there, and I don't want to do that. It's just so much easier for me to grab the brush and go from that to that. Seamless. All right, let's keep building out the depth. One thing you'll see here is the atmospheric or the aerial perspective, where we're seeing darker tones closest to us and then progressively getting lighter as we travel through into the distance. That's awesome. We're seeing it right there. That's an example for you. Dark, less dark, and then lighter again. There's also some chromatic aberration, which we'll just get rid of now while I remember. Optics, remove chromatic aberration. That's that highlight there, that green line. I get that a lot on this Laowa 10mm, but easy fix. So to keep building out that depth perception, we need to lift our darker tones back there. So I'm just using my brush again, and every time I want a new brush, I just simply push K, and it gives me a new brush. And I've just lifted those tones, and that is something that a painter will do. Keep everything lighter in the back, and then get a greater tonal range as we get closer. For the lichens, I'm going to boost the whites and the highlights, and that's going to very nicely, and I'm going to keep running that along now, whites and highlights all through here, the vegetation. So it goes from that to that, just giving it a bit of light, luminosity. I'm even going to actually run that same brush through this area, just so we don't have all these muddy midtones everywhere. I'm trying to just get some tonal variance, the greater tonal range in some of these zones. I'll recover that a little more. Now, another thing I want to show you guys is the color grading. This is going to work wonders here for our highlights, so we can warm those up a touch more. And then the mids, to really lean into that color contrast, let's cool the midtones. So now we've got that real lovely cool and warm contrast, which makes these moments just so pleasing on the eye. The last thing I do is warm these highlights in the middle there a little further, and I'll just do that with the brush this time. Just getting some yellows in here, trying to lead the eye to that point, some more yellow, and I'll just rehaze that, which basically lifts the midtones, so it just really pushes that atmospheric perspective even further. And lucky last, we're just going to bring the exposure, highlights and whites down a little more, all up here. So it's amazing how much, there we go, we're just getting that full recovery now, so it's not overexposed. For the right hand side, it's looking a little dark up over here, so we'll just lift the shadows and blacks in that zone. Might even slightly crop that out anyway. Do that now. I don't like cropping, but in this case, I think we need to just bang, pull it in a touch. That goes from that to that. We've come a long way. Are we finished? Not at all. But we've done probably 95%. The last 5%, if you've heard me teach before, we need to let this marinate. Let's just let it sit come back later with some fresh eyes and go, what the heck were we thinking? Or we might look and say, yeah, I like the direction this is going in, but we need a little more X, Y, Z. You need to let it sit for a while. Come back with those fresh eyes. This gives you the bulk of the work anyway. And even if you had to leave it here, you'd still probably have, obviously, hopefully a nice image. You can see what you can get out with the dynamic range in our cameras, and it just makes it more enjoyable shooting these single exposures out there, in my opinion. But yeah, I'll save this one now as a PSD file, Photoshop document, and I'll just put it in my draft folder. And it will sit there for who knows how long, but when I'm in the mood, I'll just open it, and it will just be these little adjustments, maybe a little darker, a little brighter, just reinforcing what's been done, maybe adding more or dialing it back. But that gives you a rough idea anyway. Hopefully that makes sense to you. If you haven't tried processing like that before, definitely give it a try. Check out my other videos or the course in the description. And like I said, a couple of key takeaways. Make sure in the field you're not just shooting the one comp. Give yourself a few, because out in the field I actually thought this one was the shot. I just really loved closing it all in and trying to create a natural frame. I was making sure I got these little details coming down and they weren't hitting the mountain, and I actually just got sidetracked worrying about all these little factors. Or maybe you just went straight for that one, but you get back here and you say, you know what, that's just a bit too basic. It's not showing what else was in the landscape. And then this is kind of where we ended up. Like I said, hopefully the best of both worlds. And even, funny enough, scrolling from these back to that, I can see that it's probably not bright enough in the background. So that's why, like I say, let it marinate. There's a lot of magenta in here too, which does happen, reflected light. But maybe we just dial those greens back a little. Get it in the green more, sorry, and less magenta. Just get rid of that. So it's hard when you're working on these monitors. If you've got natural light coming into your room, it's really hard to get the edit correct first run through. I might even just lift the shadows just in that top part up there. So I'm going to leave it here. I'm not going to try and finish this off. At the very least, I hope this has just got you inspired to get outside. Keep watching those skies, and hey, there's different skies for different subject matters. There's no right or wrong. Ultimately, if you're outside with your camera, I think that's the best thing you can be doing. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in another video soon.